What is up, metal and heavy music fans? This is Flight of Icarus from MetalTrenches.com. As always, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoy it, and please go down to the description, sign up for our Patreon. $1 a month helps me really cover the overhead for all the different stuff I'm doing and branching out into new stuff in the future. But that said, it is time to recommend you another 3 albums that you are not going to want to miss, and let's just get into it. First up, we have the return of California atmospheric, progressive, post-metal, post-hardcore band Wrvth. And I'm sadly sorry to hear that this is going to be their swan song. This is their final album out via Unique Leader Records. It's called No Rising Sun. I'd recommend Wrvth to fans of Fallujah, So Hideous, and Numenorian, among other things. And I absolutely loved this band's 2015 self-titled album. It was one of, if not my favorite album of that entire year. And so all the more heartbreaking that these guys are calling it quits in the end. But they're going to leave their own small little legacy here. And thought it was appropriate to throw in a Blade Runner quote in my review. The light that burns twice as bright burns half as long. And this band has definitely burned so very, very brightly. This continues to be the case on No Rising Sun. And there are some changes, though, I say, from the last one. Like, I feel like the previous album, in addition to kind of the atmospheric melancholy that sort of forms the foundation of their sound, there were more kind of somewhat even playful moments of, like, mathcore-infused technicality. I found myself thinking a lot about, like, the Number 12 Looks Like You, especially their, well, what was their last album, Worse Than Alone, although more on those guys soon, because they've got their new album coming up. But in any case, this one is much more kind of morose. It's more sort of post-black infused, definitely leaning more on the post-metal side of things, a lot more just sort of pure, atmospheric, very kind of depressive. I kept thinking about Warforged Voice album, actually, quite frequently as I was listening to this, and even though these guys aren't death metal, so to speak, I mean, they definitely have some kind of death metal elements. They still, I feel like they structure their songs very similarly. It's a very similar kind of process. They play with those same sort of jazz influences and a variety of different progressive influences. And yeah, there are definitely just some parallels there. They're kind of, I almost consider them to be almost like cousins in terms of just how these albums sound, just with a different sort of foundational element behind them. But anyways, I'm rambling on. This is a great album. I wish we could hear more from them in the future, but I'm just glad that we got something before they put the final nail in the coffin. Next up, we've got folky Canadian black metal band Arctos with their stunning debut full-length album, Beyond the Grasp of Mortal Hands, which is out via Northern Silence Productions. I'd recommend Arctos to fans of Amiensis, Audacis, and Uada. This is another band that I have previously talked about. I did a review in 2017 of their very solid EP, Aspire Silent, which I just felt was very promising. I was very interested to see where they would go with that, and in just 2 years, they've really come a long way with this full length. They've got kind of this very ancient atmosphere that reminds me of bands like Enslaved and Moon Sorrow, but that's also expanded outwards in a number of different ways. It's a very consistent flow to this album, and incorporating a lot of different elements. The song Shattered Tomb in particular kind of pays tribute to Opeth at certain parts. It's got this very sort of misty backdrop that reminds me of their kind of mid-career albums, and also the proggy songwriting, and even a few ripping guitar solos in there that remind me of Ackerfeld. But then they go like full Gorgoroth in the fiery conclusion. So jumping around, and then A Realm Beyond also, the riffs on that one are straight out of an Immortal album. So you're really getting a broad spectrum of different black metal, black and death metal throughout the course of this thing. some acoustic guitar, some stringed instruments to fill things out. Big step forward. If you like black metal, folk metal, progressive metal, you're going to enjoy this one. And then last but not least, we've got Tampa, Florida caustic hardcore outfit Meatwound coming back and evoking very 90s aggro attitude with their third album, now coming via Financial Ruin, Dead Tank, and Pax Aeternum, each of those kind of covering a different version of the release. The album is called Culero, which is Spanish for asshole, or I've also seen like coward. It's basically just a gratuitous thing to call somebody. I'd recommend Meatwound to fans of Helmet, Left Behind, and Mantar. And I didn't even think about this when I started recording, but yes, this is another band that I have previously covered. So this whole roundup is made up of sort of returning bands that I'm excited to see new stuff from. But in any case, another album I reviewed back in 2017. It was their second album, Largo. And now, so this is their third. And I had previously kind of compared Largo to the metallic hardcore, just boot to the face, very aggressive style of bands like Left Behind, mixed in with the sort of gritty 90s aesthetic of bands like Helmet, again, especially their first album, Strap It On, which was particularly just kind of raw. But on this one, I think they've really leaned into sort of the latter piece of that I'm getting less of the metallic hardcore vibe, although that said, the vocals on here are still very extreme, kind of sludgy, vicious. I was trying to put my finger on who this guy reminds me of, and I started thinking of Fear Factory of all things. So this band, the band sounds nothing like Fear Factory, but the vocalist kind of has a similar, when I think back to like Replica, like it just reminds me of that. But in any case, yeah, the music itself is much more kind of leaning into that sort of alternative, grungy, gritty, bleak music from the 90s. Again, like Helmet and bands of that ilk. But in any ways, I love how all that kind of combines together to make this just knuckle-dragging, intense, headbanging music. And it also, the other comparison, I threw that out there in my For Fans Of section, is Mantar. I feel like Mantar is a bit, it's kind of slower and sludgier than these guys. This album definitely gets pretty fast. But there are certain songs on here that definitely had me thinking of that, like Fist of God and Final Archive. But regardless, it did remind me of, like, I caught Mantar live in 2016 on stage, and I recall talking about in my sort of write-up of that show that watching those two shirtless Germans just tear it up on stage is probably the closest feeling I'll ever get to, like, watching a band on stage back in like 1992, do sort of the same thing. And I'm getting that same sort of vibe from certain aspects of this album as well. But in any case, all that to say, the 1-2 punch of the bass and drums on this album is just so good. It hits me in a very special place. So yeah, definitely don't miss it. And that will wrap things up. So yeah, 3 more albums that you should definitely check out, bands you should be aware of. Links to all 3 of them down in the description. If you enjoy what you hear, definitely go hear the full things. Follow the band's social media, all that good stuff, and buy the albums. Like, if you really like it enough, then please buy the albums. Like, it really makes a difference. And that's what this site is all about. Giving these bands the support and the recognition they deserve. So share that out. And then, one more time, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Give us a comment if you have some particular thoughts. I'd read all of them at this point. And again, hit up the Patreon. Yes, you. Hit up the Patreon. Become a subscriber. And know that you are really helping me, even if it's just the change out of your couch every month. But that said, Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.